I'm a security guard hired to protect an estate. The Forest Has Eyes, Part 12. Written by The Forest Has Eyes. This is it. I guess I should have known when I stepped out onto the porch after that surreal experience inside the Cazamoth house. Snow's been setting in now. The fall's gone. I knew that the second I had to push hard on the front door to get it open. Roseanne took the lead and broke off for the perimeter wall, said she needed to convene, whatever that meant. Isaac and I approached the Europeans as they drove their van through the gate, swerving and parking it not too far from the porch, right side towards us. We must have looked like a bunch of crazy militiamen, what with Isaac's one-eyed, bearded Grizzly Adams look and my walking with body armor and an AR strapped to my chest. The stocky European man dropping out from the van caught me by surprise. "Isaac, comrade, we've brought you supply." I guess we didn't shake them none. Thankfully, using the emergency credit card that Theodore keeps inside of a false red brick, right side, third up on the second row, Garrett and Merkel were able to bring us a whole van full of reassurance. Theo did say that this was only to be used under extreme circumstances. After the past few months, I'd say we are well past extreme circumstances. Gareth opened up the back of the trunk as Merkel proudly presented us with the goods. Boxes on effing boxes of surplus 5.56, many of which were already preloaded into metal magazines. It cost a bit, but it would save us the hours it would take to hand load them all. On top of that, we've got road flares, smoke grenades, canisters specifically marked with an orange diamond. If my munitions knowledge isn't that out of date, it's best not to play those too close to your literal chest. We had shotgun shells of all kinds and a few new toys, one of which was a slick pistol I'd seen plenty of special weapon guys back in Chicago use. An FN 5.7 chambered in, 5.7 millimeter. Might not be as powerful as a Desert Eagle, but its accuracy and the fact that it can carry 31 rounds made me jump at the chance to carry it as a second. Well, technically as a third now. It was when I was inspecting it that Merkel chimed in while showing Isaac some shells. "So, you two are working out here, correct?" Isaac looked over his shoulder at me. I stayed quiet. He was the one with the rapport with these two. Right on cue, he cleared his throat. Something like that. You know, running, gunning, driving a senile witch lady around, shooting creatures in the backyards, fighting demons in basements, yeah." Then he crossed his arms, feeling oh so pleased with himself. "Yeah, it's been an eventful tenure up here at Cazamoth Exterminators Incorporated." Is that the name we're going with for now? I thought. I guess it is. "A shooting," Merkel, the stockier, shorter one, pondered. Gareth spoke. "So you say you shot these creatures?" Isaac nodded. "Not like a distant silhouette, like the rest of the townsfolk, like actually have seen lurks in the woods. What do they look like? How many rounds they take? Are there multiple species? Is it—" Isaac held up his hand. "Listen, fellers, I said we shot at some. I'll be honest, I don't know what's going on with this place. I mean, even after all these months. But I know one thing. They took the kid. And we've got to load up and shoot them all to get him back, you feel me?" A dark look seemed to grow in their eyes. Gareth looked off, scratching his neck. Merkel crossed his arms. "A child, yes. They seem to like to disappear." "How long ago?" Isaac scratched the back of his head. I gazed at my watch. Like less than a few days? Few days? Merkel buried his bearded lips in the palm of his hand, probably thinking about something. By now, I'd gathered a bunch of items in a tough box, dragging it out of the back and heaving it up. Look, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure receiving absurd amounts of firepower, but we have a job to do. I gave a nod to Isaac and carried it in. As I did, I noticed Roseanne over by the wall. She seemed to be kneeling. I knew well enough by now to let her do whatever she needed. God knows what would happen if I disturbed her. Probably would be trapped inside a rock for the rest of my life. Or a tree. Probably a tree. Now or never. It'd been a while since I did a full-on load-up supply, like a mission-style load-up. Despite all the YouTube videos and operator channels recommendations, I'd be carrying 9 magazines with a 10th loaded in my 15, 6 on my gut and 3 on my back. My Glock was moved to my left side as a backup for my backup in case I found myself really in the shit, which, considering past situations, was likely. The 5.7 was my new sidearm, strapped to my thigh on a drop holster. It was around this time that I checked the weather, and boy oh boy, was it getting cold. Like Georgia cold. Hate your life cold. Despite how much I loved it, I ditched my leather jacket, instead sporting a black soft shell and a beanie. Plus a pair of clear Oakleys, because the last thing I need is to repeat Isaac's accident out here. No offense, brother. Stuffing the rest of the magazines along with a ton of smokes for concealment, flares, incendiaries into my pack, I heaved one strap over my shoulder and headed out. It was by this time I saw that, 1. The Europeans were still there. Isaac sat on the bed of their van talking to them, though it seemed by the amount of shotgun shell bandoliers he had, he'd done his own kitting out. 2. Roseanne was still over by the wall praying. Was it praying? Meditating? Demon whispering? I'll have to ask her. I waltzed over, dropping my assault pack by the back tire of their van. Isaac whistled. Man, Sarge, is this how you rolled back in the day? Not exactly, I replied. It was only midday, but by now I could see my breath in the icy air. Then again, we aren't limited by regulations, so whatever. I eyed Merkel and Gareth. I took off my Oakleys and clipped them onto my plate carrier. What are you two still here for? Sun's gonna be getting low, and you probably know what happens when that happens. Gareth walked over to the side of the van facing away, and I could hear one of the side doors slide open. Merkel cracked his neck. Gareth and I were talking. From what it sounds like, you 2 or 3. Merkel looked over at Roseanne. His eyes told me that he felt uneasy near her. That you faced best chances again against these things. And from what it sounds like, you would kill some of them, yes? I nodded. I have sold many guns to many people. Not only in this town, but outsiders, neighbors, family. Ones who go into these woods and never come back. Now you have your child that's gone and disappeared. He waved a hand horizontally. Yet, me and Gareth will help you. You'll help us, I said. Gareth walked over from behind the van, now presenting what he was searching for. He held a large elephant gun, a bulky body with a gigantic barrel attached to it. With his other hand, he handed an engraved double-barrel shotgun to his partner in crime. Yes, help you. The way of my ancestors and of your old comrades. I knew what he was saying. I nodded. Brothers in arms we were then. Dwight. A voice came from behind me, so close I could basically feel her on the back of my neck. It's then that I remembered. brothers and sister in arms. I don't know how no one saw her approach, since we were in an open lot, midday, and the crunch of the snow would be loud as hell. But Roseanne appeared right at the edge of our semicircle. "Gentlemen, Isaac, after a bit of convening with almost 7 deities, I believe I have an educated guess of our next move." Educated? Surely you have picked up on my relationship with the earth? It did make sense now that I thought about it. I mean, all the plants, her obsession to stay on shore near the grass, how she always sat near that fake plastic tree in the living room. There is a lot wrong with this area, this place, but whatever we're currently up against, it isn't native. Isaac racked his Bellini, starting to load shells. "Native, like Indians?" Roseanne shook her head, squeezing her temple. "No, Isaac, I mean natural." That didn't make any sense to me. Are you saying a crab-walking naked man, or Tim, is natural? Roseanne shrugged. "I don't know everything, but what I do know is it's poisoning this area like a virus. The ground, the soul of this place, works against it and to our benefit. It also gives off the direction of its source." "Its source?" I asked, now getting the idea. "Yes, I can guide us, although generally, and if we use the heel-toe express, we might be able to get there in time to save John. If not, we'll at least be able to stop this." "We're saving John, Roseanne," I said. "I know you want to, Dwight. I'm just saying that if things turn out dirty." "Wait, which?" Gareth perked up, and her ire turned from me to him. "Roseanne? Roseanne, you want us to, what? Walk through the damn woods that kidnap people, turn their guts into spaghetti, and stop this?" Roseanne crossed her arms, staring the lanky German down. "You said you wanted to help. This is what needs to be done. If you're so scared about walking through the woods, how about you ask my friend over there how he camped in the woods for the last few months?" She pointed at Isaac, and both looked surprised. "Listen, I know it's not a good option, but it's the only one, Dwight." I looked around at the motley crew. A retired staff sergeant, a one-eyed trucker, a fortune teller, and 2 European arms dealers. It would have to do. We would need to take the trail, not only to save time, but since Roseanne's trail led north, it would be a good place to start. I took the lead. The rest followed in a staggered column-type formation. Roseanne was up next to me, pointing out the different shifts and changes in the aura. We saw all types of tracks, deer, foxes, human, what looked like oversized bird marks. We were nearing track marker 1 when Merkel asked, "So, soldier, you never told me how tough they are." I cracked my neck, my right thumb rubbing the texture of the pistol grip. "What do you mean?" How many bullets do they take?" My mind raced back to the night in the trail. We were near the spot where I was running, rifle in one hand, Glock in the other. One of the creatures walked onto the trail, and in my haste, I fingered an entire magazine into it, before colliding with it shoulder first. The fall, the mud, my rifle going off and taking a chunk out of a tree. As I ran my hand along the impact marks on that tree while walking, I shrugged. It depends, although I do know that they don't really like to get shot by anything bigger than 9mm. The 2 Europeans cackled from the back. "Oh, don't worry, friend, we have plenty of that to go around." The walk went on for hours, and for the most part, it was uneventful. Maybe it was what transpired at the house, or maybe it was the excessive amount of ordnance dangling off us that caused it. But the woods stayed quiet. Not a bird, not a deer, nor a hobgoblin jumping out to eat our faces off. Just silence. Roseanne led us all the way to the northern pass, where she led Isaac and the Europeans down a light slope. I turned around, checking down both pathways, and before I knew it, we were off, walking into the pure, absolute unknown. Nighttime found us quickly, very quickly. Roseanne and I led the group through the woods. She felt the trees as they went by, running her hands over the bark, the dying leaves of the trees and bushes, the sharp pines. It was like every single point of contact spoke to her. I'm not a religious man, but I'm now a superstitious one, especially after all of this. One thing is for certain, whatever she was harnessing to lead us, it was real. Definitely real. The winter months were showing their presence loud and clear. By 5 p.m., it was getting dark. The sun was fading away into an orange hue, and we needed to bed down. We found a nice clearing right in the middle of our path, around a 100-meter radius of the woodline, with a slight hill giving us a point to retreat to if we made contact. 5 hours of walking through the snow, taking a piss break, walking some more, Isaac tripping over thin air and falling in the snow, his shotgun going off and gutting a small tree, me yelling at him, Gareth and Merkel laughing, more walking, Gareth claiming to see a man of vines following us, Merkel claiming to see a Native American. Well, it was eventful. Isaac and the Europeans were building a fire in the middle of the clearing. Our packs lay all around it. I decided to walk over to the woodline and relieve myself. I saw Roseanne had walked over to a far-off oak tree to reach out her palm and, I guess, convene with it. I could hear the other three messing around behind me. "Y'all got any matches?" "Yet. 9. 9? Well, give me some here." "No, you fool. 9 as in no." "9 is no? So what? Yes, 5, 2 tomorrow, 3 retake the Rhineland, 4 the Volga Riv?" Merkel chimed in. "How about we use a flare?" "Well, I mean, we dumped a bunch of kerosene on it, so..." I was zipping up my pants when a flare of purple light came from behind. I turned around on the dime. Heck, I even saw Roseanne break her gaze to look. All 3 dove behind their packs as the flare and lighter fluid erupted into a large ball. She shook her head as I could hear all 3 of them whooping and hollering as they tossed more wood onto the pyre, and somehow, strangely, there was a sense of security and joy in seeing such a large symbol of light in the middle of this place. Soon I walked back to the semicircle. Isaac, Merkel, and Gareth were BSing, as usual, and I took up a watch position. Nothing too high speed, just scanning the woodline for figures, making sure Roseanne hadn't been dragged off. You know, simple. You could write a book about these 3. "So Isaac, where are you from?" Gareth asked as he leaned back on his green canvas bag. Isaac took a moment to think. Idaho, I think." "Idaho?" Merkel was confused. I laughed. "Yeah, you would be from Idaho." Gareth spoke next. "You said, 'I think.' Are you not sure?" "Listen, it's all kind of a haze ever since I was 8, right? To be honest, I'm not sure how I started to be a trucker. Just that one day I was waiting to get it repaired. I heard this harmonic singing in the woods and, well, I got lost." "Singing? In the woods? What is up in Idaho?" Okay, no. That was in Texas. I think it was." Isaac scratched his scruffy chin. I think it was. Maybe." Merkel laughed and slapped his knee. You are a crazy guy, Isaac. Crazy guy. We survived this. I want you to work with us. Between all the scruffy hair and his battered eye, Isaac smiled. You know what, Marker? Merker. Mackerel, yeah. I think you've got yourself a deal, Isaac said. It was around this time that I stood up to check on Roseanne. She'd been sitting away from the fire. She was probably all right, but I knew well enough that lying in the snow, you could literally be frozen in your spot. My advance wasn't quiet, and a small turn from her head showed that she wasn't unaware. Hello, Dwight. Roseanne, are you doing all right? She nodded. It's close, but still so far, but also very close. What's that saying? So close, yet so far? I scanned the dark woodline ahead of her before looking down. She'd been in that position for nearly an hour. On her knees, head down, arm on the tree. How did you get into all of this? I asked her. She raised an eyebrow. All of what? I gestured around to the woods for some reason, even though her eyes were clearly shut. I let my rifle drop as I crossed my arms. This, water demons, spirits, house calls for exorcisms. There was a moment of quiet, and then she shrugged. Someone had to do it. You grow up in a town so full of unnatural things, and no one trying to be some sort of expert or medium. Someone's got to try and figure out what it all means. I guess it did make some sense. Her nonchalant way of dealing with the goings-on. She wasn't really an expert, just the best that the town had. Just a woman obsessed with ghosts living in a greenhouse, huh? I said. This actually got a laugh out of her, the first that I'd seen so far. Tell me, Roseanne, what do you think all of this means? She thought for a minute, her hand still gripping the bark before she could speak. Well, meow. A voice called out loudly from the woodline. My hands shot to my rifle, shouldering it as I scanned the dark trees. Roseanne didn't move. I don't know if she even could, but I stood right behind her, scanning around. Ribbit! Part of me felt like I'd been here before, and I had a strange feeling of, not deja vu, but this was familiar. Dwight, it's not a threat. I raised an eyebrow. It? I asked. A branch snapped in front of us, causing me to turn on the tack light on my rifle, illuminating the man behind the tree. The naked, nearly faceless, crab-walking man. Woof! Its beady eyes and a lined mouth stared back in defiance. If it had any muscles in its face, I would have guessed that it would be laughing at me, like, "Ha ha, I scared you a second time, asshole." I let my rifle drop as I stood up. I looked down at Roseanne, who was now smirking, her eyes still closed. Something funny, young lady? I asked. Woof! The naked crab-walking man said. I shook my head, running my hand from my beanie down to my chin. All right, you got me. I held my hands out. Now get out. And just like before, it turned to one side and shuffled away at nearly 60 miles an hour into the darkness. Is this what you call natural to these woods, Roseanne? She didn't respond. I walked back to the semicircle, Roseanne still on the edge. Isaac traded spots on watch with me and I passed out in my bag, letting the sleep take me. Just a nap to help me make it through the rest of the night. I passed out at around 6:23 p.m. It was 6:25 when I awoke to sounds of the European running around. What the hell is that? I jolted up. Isaac was already aiming his shotgun at something behind me. I fell asleep facing the woodline Roseanne was at, who was still there, unfazed. I staggered to my feet to see all three of them aiming at something. It stood just in front of the tree line. The light created a small void where the shadows covered it. It stood there, unafraid, unfazed, a humanoid. Gareth was in the prone, aiming his elephant gun at it. Merkel was trying to use his hands as binoculars, and Isaac was trying to unjam all of the rounds he tried to slam load into it. Yep, we were gonna die out here. Should I shoot it? Gareth asked. What if it's a person? Merkel asked. Do you really think that any sane person's gonna be out here at this time of night, Rusky? Isaac asked. I jogged up to their side of the campfire and knelt down, aiming my rifle at it. Isaac, keep eyes on Roseanne. This might be a distraction to snatch her up. Isaac nodded, turning and running over to where she was camped out. I rested my hand on Gareth's right shoulder. He seemed to be a left-handed one. If you've got a shot, take it. A small chuckle came from the German as he slowed his breathing. One breath in and one breath out. Second breath in and second out. Third breath in, and the barrel of the elephant gun erupted as a red-hot round shot out. The muzzle blast was so loud, even my electrical headphones crackled trying to block it. The round went soaring and just missed the figure. The pine tree behind it shook and shuddered as the round hit it head-on. The figure, however, never moved an inch. Instead, it remained there. We were less than 100 meters from it now, and yet it never made a move to attack. Instead, it said one simple word back. Hey! I gotta admit it, even in the dire endgame that we are in, I laughed. Gareth, stand down, I said. The German looked confused at my request, but didn't argue when I picked up and jogged over. I gotta admit, it was a short run, but in the heavy snow with all of my gear, well, I was giving off a cloud of steam when I approached that skeleton. Timothy, I said, probably looking like an actual crackhead while talking to this thing. Tim was dead still, no pun intended. Also, I don't think that I saw a drop of snow on him at all. His stand was shinier than ever, and I think I remember him wearing a small scarf around his neck. Did skeletons even need scarves? I guess their bones get cold, but was Tim even real? I'm asking questions here that will never be answered. Knock! For once, Tim said, not waiting until I was looking away to talk. Long way from home, huh, Tim? Why you out here? Silence emerged as a cold wind blew past, moving Tim's scarf but not rattling his bones at all. They're here, Nark! A chill went down my spine as he said that. They? I asked. As in them? The silver monsters who'd kidnapped John, or the unknowns out there watching us from the trees. They're angry, Nark. They are hungry. Tim's high-pitched voice echoed through the seemingly empty forest around. To the uninitiated, at least, it seemed empty. I knew that it was really full of things, beings. They were watching us, staying just out of the light of the fire, waiting to make their move. Careful, Nark. I turned and looked back at the campfire. Gareth was still aiming down his rifle as Merkel stood up, holding out his arms as if to ask, well? I shrugged and looked back at Tim, who was no longer there. Oh, Tim, how ever would I have gotten here without you? And to think, just 2 months ago, I smashed the stock of a 308 into your mouth. I'm sorry for that, by the way. I walked back over to the camp. By now, the rest of the group was gathering. Roseanne sat cross-legged by her bag. Isaac and the Europeans started to continue their legendary talks once more, and I sat there, legs outstretched, rifle resting across my thighs. I knew this couldn't last. The calm, the quiet before the storm, but it felt good. Too good. No, it wouldn't last. Roseanne pulled her legs up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Dwight, get some sleep. I raised an eyebrow. Up until now, she'd said nothing. You're going to need it. Trust me. As long as the fire burns, they'll stay away. Get some sleep. I didn't have anything to say in response. Truth be told, I was getting tired. Very tired. I awoke to a blast of cold air and snowflakes hitting my face. The wind weaving around my eyebrow and piercing my eyes. I stood up, noticing that the fire was duller but still burned bright. Isaac helped me to my feet. What's going on? I asked. Isaac shrugged. I don't know. The storm just rolled in a few minutes ago. Roseanne's trying to get some wood and stuff with the Russians to burn. Even though I could tell that he was yelling, I still struggled to hear him. However, I noticed the usually quiet forest around us was lively. Trees cracked and groaned. The wind howled, hissed and roared. And from the woods around us, the laughing started up. The same laughing I heard when the power first went out. The voices I heard while trapped in that storm running. They're here now. Gareth and Merkel carried 2 large piles of firewood and dropped it into the fire pit. Merkel poured a load of lighter fluid onto the tinder, and Roseanne popped a flare. The fire battled the winter air as it fought for supremacy of the area. Gareth took up his elephant gun and began to scan the area with Isaac and Merkel. Roseanne grabbed onto the front of my plate carrier, pulling me close. We're surrounded. If this goes out, we're all screwed. She didn't need to tell me twice. I reached down to my left side, pulling out my Glock. Here. Roseanne took a step back, looking nervous at the weapon. You might not have used it, or like it, but you're gonna need it. She looked up at me, and then down at the handgun, and with a nod, she grabbed hold of it. I passed her the 4 pistol mags I had for the Glock, and she shoved them into the pockets of her bomber jacket. I turned on my rifle's tack light, pointing it outwards as we scanned. Look out! Isaac yelled, and I saw it. It looked like a comet coming right for us, but that was an exaggeration. What wasn't an exaggeration was the fact that an engine-sized rock was coming right for us. Everyone scattered in all directions, and I charged out, covering my face. The boulder, as it is best described, smashed right into the fire. It sent burning tinder and lighter fluid-covered flaming branches soaring in all directions. But more importantly, it killed the majority of our light. The laughter was now joined by howls and cheers, as well as roars as I reached for my gun belt. I popped off a red flare. Around, I could see the rest of the group lighting up theirs as well. A series of colorful pyros surrounded our former campfire. I ran over to my assault pack, heaving it up onto my back as I aimed for the woodline. This was it. The calm before the storm. I looked to my left. Isaac gave me a nod and racked his shotgun, chambering a familiar, dark orange shell. I looked to my right. Roseanne gripped her pistol nervously. Which direction are we heading? I called out in the wind. Roseanne pointed to the north. Of course, it was always the north. Even if we took deviations to the left or right, it all led one direction. I rolled up a sleeve on my fleece. One piece of gear I forgot to mention wasn't from Gareth or Merkel, but from the army. It was an electric watch, usually used by pointmen to track which degree on the map they were heading to. Now, sure, you could use a compass, but in this weather, under this light, I'll take the watch's electronic glow over a busted standard issue compass any day. I input the azimuth and shouldered my rifle. Even with my fancy watch, Roseanne was our lifeline to the source. She had little to no combat experience, and the way that she held that Glock made me realize she'd probably never learned how. And now here we are, waiting for someone, something to take the first shot. I cursed under my breath for not trying to teach her how to use the gun when I had the chance. But then, my eyes caught sight of a dark figure bolting from the woods right towards us. Isaac shot up to his feet and aimed his shotgun. "Hello from Idaho, you mother!" An explosion of fire escaped from his barrel, extending outwards in a huge pillar. It was so bright, especially in the dark area around it, that I squinted just trying to see. That was it, the shot that ended this entire charade. Gareth and Merkel joined Isaac as they lobbed hate at the wood line. A series of orange, yellows, whites, and reds tore through the trees, causing some far-off pines to shake, others to fall, and the woods to roar back with pained moans and unearthly voices. Normally, I would try to assign rates of fire, but that would take a whole lot of time to teach them, and I could tell since we were all picking up and assaulting forward that we had no intention of staying. "Come on!" I called out to Roseanne, and I moved forward. She stayed close on my right side. As we pushed up, I could see several figures in front. I dropped to a knee, so did Roseanne, and we both fired at the figures. A series of controlled bursts from my rifle caused some of them to bounce back. And even then, all I knew was that I was shooting at silhouettes. Roseanne's rounds were more of a deterrent, but they helped back up my line of fire. I fired, then she did. Back in the army, we called this talking guns. We picked up and moved forward, pushing into the woodline. It was a mess. Tracers and shots meant to take down effing rhinos tore through the branches above, causing us to duck and take cover behind the trees and falling logs. They stayed just out of sight. My rifle's light trying to spot them, but just as I zeroed in on them, they were gone. Roseanne called out ones around us, all the while grabbing onto my arm and dragging me in the direction that we needed to go. In the distance, I could hear Isaac cheering and Merkel and Gareth shouting out old war cries befitting an old battlefield. It wasn't until the snow was coming down hard that I realized that me and Roseanne hadn't stopped running for a good while. We only did when a large pine tree came right down square in our path. Hitting the ground just before a slope downwards, Roseanne stopped just before it, but with all of my gear and the weight of my pack, I nearly toppled over. "Dwight!" Roseanne yelled through the wind. I placed my hand on the log, trying to push myself over. That's when I heard Roseanne open up on something with her Glock. I turned around only to catch a silver hand out of the corner of my eye, shoving me over the log. I went tumbling down the slope. My pack, my vest, my rifle all worked to my disadvantage as the weight threw me around so much I hit the ground. My mind blended. I spit up dirt and iced over grass. A haunting memory of weeks prior. Then I heard it, something taking off towards me, both feet. If it only had 2 feet. It was running at me at full force. Forcing myself up onto my feet, I flicked my rifle into auto and fired into the forest. I guess I was already standing on uneasy feet because whatever silver-skinned beast hit me sent me flying back into a small ditch as it drove its shoulder into me. I scrambled to my feet again. At the mouth of the ditch stood a small tree. I took up cover, gripping my rifle to the side of the tree. Then I quickly switched to cover the other side. A set of footsteps came charging from the right side. I aimed to the right. A series of rounds sent whatever beast was about to emerge back into the darkness. Then, from the left, I gripped onto the tree, and another series of rounds sent the beast back into the shadows as well. There were sounds from the right again. I aimed down, and then the click of my rifle. It was empty. Like clockwork, my right hand flew down to my thigh and pulled the 5.7 from its holster. Rounds cracked off, and I swear I could make out a set of teeth in the dark. An angry scowl right before they ducked back into the shadows. I slapped the gun back into its holster and tossed the empty mags out. In other circumstances, I would have liked to keep the mag. But here, I could care less. All I cared about was the relief I got when I slapped the fresh 30-round metal mag in and slapped the bolt release home. Again, they started to come close, from the left, from the right, then the front. All the while, I switched from possible target to possible target. All only possibles because I never saw them clearly. I mean, never. They never showed their faces. They never came out, and all the while I wondered, where was Roseanne? Isaac? I looked around, trying to find them. A roar from my 8 o'clock snapped me back to reality, and I swung around. My mind was battling itself. Fear for my friends, and the military calculus I had burned into my DNA fighting. One was trying to help, the other was trying to keep me alive. Another magazine empty. I was running thin. It was my second one. I barely had just enough time, backpedaling further and further into the ditch to chamber the round and to release onto the unseen foe in the dark. 12, 10, 2, 3, 9. My rear. I hadn't checked my back. What if I was being snuck up on? I turned around, seeing another figure in my peripheral. I zeroed in on it, and it wasn't a creature. It was him. I barely recognized him since it had been so long, but there he was. Tan skin, maroon, white, and red paint with a feathered headgear on. He was standing there, not dressed for the winter, but I don't think that it mattered to him. The native, I thought. My barrel lowered as we both stared each other in the eye. My Oakleys were nearly fogged up from all the steam, and I could feel myself breathing as heavy as I did after my first gunfight. What did he see me as? Why was he following me? Was he here to finish me off? Why would he? He had the chance every time he appeared right as they were about to overwhelm me. And every time, I heard a set of heavy footfalls from behind me. I turned and yanked on the trigger hard. A set of silver hands with black nails were just a meter from my face before I sent them back into the darkness. Then, click. My rifle was empty again. I threw the empty mag from my rifle, loading another one in. I was burning through ammo like no one's uncle. I turned back around and he was gone. In his place, where he stood, was the moonlight. It shined through the 2 tall oak trees just 50 meters above me. It was a clearing. I bolted for it, knowing that it was probably my only hope right now for not getting swarmed. The wretched screams and hands were all outstretched as I fired into the woods around me. The carry handle of my bag got caught on a branch, but I powered forward, snapping the branch and causing me to stumble. I nearly fell into the snow as I broke out into the clearing. I whipped around, and there I saw them. 5, 10, maybe a dozen, no, dozens. They all stood just behind the tree line, but I could finally see them. Some of them, the silver-skinned monsters from the trail, but others, elongated, strange creatures with reflective black skin. Others, animals oversized and shaped like humanoids. All of them stopped at the edge of the woods. I still had my rifle shouldered as I stared out, my lips frozen, quivering. The silence as they just stared, some of them beginning to back off. "Come on!" I roared, firing off a series of rounds. Tracers broke the air as some hit the trees, others the rocks, but some still hit them, causing them to jolt and stumble, but never causing them to charge. Instead, they just backed off into the darkness of the woods. I stood there, confused. Then I took a look around at the clearing. It was from the drawing, half sunken into a huge divot in the ground, possibly the work of a sinkhole. There was a large house, bigger than the Cazamoth house. Angled and pointed rooftops stood in defiance to the ground that had tried to swallow it. What was this? Hollowed ground? This was too much for them. Then it hit me. I looked down at my watch. The arrow pointed dead towards the house, towards the north, towards the source. This was it. I had reached it, and judging by the cold, harsh winds, which was no longer broken by distant gunfire, I had reached the end, and I was all alone. All right, I don't know how I've still got service, but I've got only 2, maybe 1 bar. But I guess I'm still within range of the towers. I'm typing this. My hands are nearly freezing up. My lips are barely able to make coherent sentences. It's been about an hour of waiting. I've lit flares, I've called out. I've even fired off a full mag into the air trying to signal the others. But nothing. I've consolidated my ammunition. I've got about 14 magazines. The ones on my vest, the ones in my pack. Around 4 5.7 pistol mags. A phone with 18% battery. And only one entrance into the house. It's an upper floor level window that I've managed to break open. It looks like a bedroom. I'll be honest. I don't know what's gonna come after this. I know, I might have said that before, but for real this time. For real. If this does get posted and makes it online, this might be one of my last posts. Isaac, Roseanne, Gareth, and Merkel, they aren't coming. I'm heading into this all alone, and I don't know if I'll make it out of this. No, John's still down there. Hundreds of people have gone missing. I don't know if I can beat the odds, but I have to try. Anyway, this is Dwight Nolan, the last member of the Cazamoth extermination team left standing. I will be back.